November 24, 1971, night. A Boeing 727 cuts through the rain with its rear stairs open in midair. Inside are one man, one parachute, and $200,000. A few hours later, the aircraft lands in Reno. The man is gone, the money is gone, the parachute is gone. The aft stairs are still hanging below the plane. No one saw him jump. No one confirmed that he reached the ground. No body was found. Not a single ransom bill was ever confirmed to have been spent. Even the name by which the world remembers him was probably not his. So did D.B. Cooper truly escape? Or did he simply fall somewhere no one could find him? Dark past. We reopen cases that appear closed by following the evidence they left behind. The story begins at Portland International Airport, one day before Thanksgiving in the United States. A man in a dark suit, white shirt, and narrow black tie approaches the ticket counter. He buys a one-way ticket to Seattle on Northwest Orient Flight 305. The name he gives is Dan Cooper. Witnesses describe him as calm, around 45 years old, and roughly 6 feet tall. He takes a seat near the rear of the aircraft in 18C. He orders bourbon and soda and lights a cigarette. He does not shout. He does not draw attention to himself. To everyone else in the cabin, he is simply another suited passenger trying to get home. Shortly after takeoff, he hands a folded note to flight attendant Florence Schaffner. She initially assumes it is a phone number and does not open it. The man calmly tells her, "Miss, you'd better look at that note. I have a bomb." He then opens his briefcase just enough for her to see wires and red stick-like objects inside. His demands are precise: $200,000 in $20 bills and 4 parachutes. The money must be ready in Seattle. If the demand is not met, the lives of everyone on board are at risk. We still do not know whether the bomb was real. For the passengers and crew, that distinction did not matter. They had to believe the threat was genuine. As the aircraft circles above Seattle, an enormous operation begins on the ground. Banks assemble 10,000 $20 bills. Their serial numbers are recorded so the ransom can be traced later. Parachutes are rushed to the airport from different sources, and the FBI joins the response. Passengers are told there is a technical delay. In one part of the cabin, people check their watches. Only a few yards away, one of the largest manhunts in American history is taking shape. When the aircraft lands in Seattle, the exchange takes place. Cooper receives the money and 4 parachutes. He allows all 36 passengers and 2 flight attendants to leave the plane. That moment must be described accurately. Releasing them does not erase the fact that he had held them under threat of death. The pilots, flight engineer and flight attendant Tena Bar remain on board. Cooper then explains the second part of his plan. The aircraft will head toward Mexico City at approximately 10,000 feet, flying slowly with the landing gear down and the cabin unpressurized. The aft stairs are to be lowered. The Boeing 727 had 3 engines mounted around its tail. Its ventral rear stairway offered an unusual exit that allowed someone to leave the aircraft without passing beneath wing-mounted engines. When the pilots say they cannot take off with the stairs already lowered, they agree to deploy them during the flight. As evening deepens, the aircraft takes off again. Outside are rain, heavy cloud, and hard wind. Below lie the dark forests of Washington State. Military aircraft follow Flight 305 from a distance, but the weather prevents them from seeing what is happening at the rear of the cabin. Cooper now has a bag of money, several parachutes, and a stairway he intends to open into the night. Tena Bar briefly helps him organize the parachutes and ransom. The bag supplied for the cash is not as practical as he expected. Cooper cuts cord from one of the reserve parachutes and tries to secure the money bag to his body. He then tells Mucklow to enter the cockpit and close the door. At the beginning of this story, the aircraft was full. Now Cooper is alone in the rear cabin. A short time later, an aft stair warning illuminates in the cockpit. The crew notices a pressure change and movement in the tail of the aircraft. It is shortly after 8 in the evening. No one sees the precise second when Cooper leaves the plane. From that moment onward, the case is no longer built around a visible man. It is built around wind, speed, and probability. When the plane lands in Reno, armed teams enter the cabin. The rear section is empty. Cooper's black tie, tie clip, and unused parachutes remain behind. The threat note is gone. He took it back. There is no trace of a bomb. The most important piece of evidence in the entire plan, the man himself, appears to have stepped through the open rear of the aircraft and out of history. The FBI, military personnel, and local search teams begin combing southwestern Washington. They repeatedly recalculate the route, wind, speed, and the moment the stairs were lowered. Aircraft and helicopters scan from above, while teams divide the ground into search grids. Yet a few minutes of uncertainty in the air becomes miles of forest below. Rain swells streams, mud erases tracks, and dense trees block the view from above. No body is found, no main parachute, no money bag. One of the case's most famous details is also one of its earliest mistakes. The name on the ticket was not D.B. Cooper, it was Dan Cooper. During the first hours of the investigation, police briefly checked another man whose initials were D.B. He was quickly cleared. His name reached the press, was repeated in reports, and eventually replaced the name in the original record. We do not know this man's face, and we do not even remember him by the alias he chose. The world searched for D.B. Cooper, while the passenger had boarded as Dan Cooper. The error did not solve the case. It did, however, show how quickly legend began overtaking fact. The black tie left on the plane later yielded a DNA sample, but not one capable of identifying Cooper with certainty. His cigarette butts were collected during the initial investigation and later went missing. Because he retrieved the threat note, investigators could not examine it for handwriting or fingerprints. This looks less like a perfect crime than an imperfect investigation in which several critical pieces of evidence were not preserved. Was Cooper an experienced parachutist? His demand for 4 parachutes and his knowledge of the Boeing 727's aft stairs suggest careful preparation. One theory is that 4 parachutes made authorities believe he might take a hostage with him, discouraging them from sabotaging the equipment. It is a clever possibility, but Cooper never explained his reasoning. He also selected a main parachute that could not be steered, left a more suitable option behind, and took a reserve that had been sewn shut for training. He knew something. The question is how much. The FBI's assessment was that an experienced skydiver would not deliberately choose a night like this. Heavy rain, freezing wind, invisible terrain, dress shoes, a parachute that offered little control over the landing point. Even if Cooper survived the jump, he still had to escape the forest, preserve the money, and avoid being seen. Yet the opposite argument contains a major absence. No body was found. No parachute was recovered. The search area was uncertain, and the forests of the Pacific Northwest are vast. Although some of his decisions appear inexperienced, he knew more about the aircraft than an ordinary passenger. Believing that Cooper died may be reasonable. Reasonable is not the same as proven. In 1978, a hunter found an instruction placard from a Boeing 727 aft stairway in the forest. Its location was broadly consistent with the aircraft's suspected flight corridor. But a lightweight placard can be carried by wind, and it cannot identify the exact point where Cooper jumped. The first physical clue found 7 years later drew another circle on the map rather than providing an answer. February 1980. More than 8 years have passed. 8-year-old Brian Ingram is playing with his family at Tena Bar on the Columbia River when he uncovers 3 decaying bundles of $20 bills in the sand. The total is $5,800. Investigators check the serial numbers. The money is part of Cooper's ransom. It is the only confirmed physical return of the cash after the hijacking. How did the money reach that riverbank? Did Cooper bury it? Did the bag fall into the water? If the river carried it, when did that happen, and from which direction? The site does not fit neatly with several early estimates of the jump zone. The position of the bills, the movement of the river, and dredging activity in the area have been debated for decades. Only one fact is certain. Of the original $200,000, just $5,800 was recovered. The rest remains missing. During the first 5 years alone, the FBI considered more than 800 people. One of the best known was Richard McCoy, who hijacked another aircraft 5 months later and escaped by parachute. Yet the flight attendant's descriptions did not match him, and the FBI eliminated him for additional reasons. Committing a similar crime does not prove that two offenders were the same person. As the years passed, the list grew. Former soldiers, pilots, aviation workers, and relatives said to have confessed on their deathbeds. Every few years, another headline declared that Cooper had been found. None of those names was tied to the case by the ransom money, the parachute, fingerprints, or an undisputed DNA match. The black tie is the most personal object Cooper left behind. It was an inexpensive clip-on tie carrying microscopic particles and, years later, a partial DNA sample. Some researchers argued that the particles might suggest a connection to aviation or industrial work, but no one knows who had handled or worn the tie before. It suggests possibilities. It does not provide a name. Cooper vanished, but he left a mark on aviation. After the hijacking, Boeing 727s were fitted with a simple device that prevented the aft stairs from opening in flight. It became known as the Cooper vein. During the same era, the rise in aircraft hijackings accelerated the spread of metal detectors and stricter passenger screening. The man disappeared. The door he used was made far harder to open again. The FBI called the investigation NORJAC, short for Northwest Hijacking. Agents questioned hundreds of people and produced thousands of pages of records. In July 2016, after nearly 45 years, the Bureau redirected active investigative resources to other priorities. That did not mean Cooper had been identified or the case had been solved. The FBI has said that specific, credible physical evidence can still be submitted for examination. What we can say with certainty is limited but important. A man boarded under the name Dan Cooper. He used a bomb threat to obtain money and parachutes. He released the passengers. He lowered the aft stairs during the flight, and he was gone when the aircraft reached Reno. Everything after that divides into two stories: a criminal who died in the forest, or a missing man who successfully began another life. Both remain possible. Neither has been proven. Let us return one last time to the aircraft from the beginning. It left Portland carrying 36 passengers, 6 crew members, and 1 suited stranger. The passengers left in Seattle. Tina Mucklow moved into the cockpit. Investigators entered the rear cabin in Reno. The seat was empty. The greatest trace this man left behind was his absence. Do you think D.B. Cooper survived that night, or did the legend begin somewhere the search teams never found? And consider this: do we still talk about him because his plan succeeded, or because we never learned how it ended? Share your view and your reasoning in the comments. To keep reopening history's unresolved files with us, like the video and subscribe to Dark Past. This was Case 8. The past never stays buried. We will open another file in the next episode.